Welcome back to another episode of Positive Talks with Mary. I am so glad you're here. And today's episode is wild, but it's also a powerful reminder that God's not done until he says he's done. And I'm talking with Darryl Bagwell, or how we like to call him on the morning show, Darryl from Toccoa. He's a big time listener of My Country 99.3, and he's somebody that I've come to know and appreciate as a friend. So Darryl, welcome to the show. I am so glad that you could come on and share your story.
Mary, thank you so much, and I am glad to be here with the lovely and talented Mary McCay. And I don't get to see her much. I get to hear her a lot, but she's visited with Laura and I in our home here, and we do indeed consider her a friend. We're just so proud of her and using her talents and this avenue to spread positive news, because there's a lot of young people that are out doing otherwise. And Mary, thanks so much for doing this. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you, Darryl. So Darryl's story, it's going to start in December of 2015. And Darryl just went out for a casual afternoon bike ride, something that he'd done plenty of times before, and he ended up flatlining on side of the road. So I'm going to leave it there. And Darryl, you can take us from the beginning. So take us back to that day. What happened?
I was approaching 50. I decided I needed to do something for my health. And because my job at the time, I was traveling. So I was either on an airplane, in my truck, or sitting at a desk. So I got very little exercise. So I took up cycling. And I had been cycling for about a little over 5 years, and loving it. Met so many good friends that I still have to this day, and just had some great times all over North Georgia. We had ridden, saw so many beautiful sights and things of that nature. In 2015, Mary, it was just a great year as far as being on the bike. I had ridden alongside everyone from 3-year-olds on push bikes to former Tour de France champions. I had had the opportunity to ride along a couple of those guys and some other professional riders. It was a big thrill for me. On that morning, as I was ending up 2015, I had pedaled right over 6,000 miles.
Wow.
And a lot of that being in the mountains of North Georgia, which I enjoyed the most. You know, there's a lot less traffic and the beauty up there. So that morning I got up, I worked that morning out of my office. Being between Christmas and New Year's, didn't do a lot of travel that time of year typically. So I went out on a very typical ride that I've done, I don't know, maybe hundreds of times, probably 12, 13 miles that I could do in an hour, pretty easy. I'll throw in right here, kind of from this point on, I am giving you details that have been given to me, because due to the manner of what happened, I have no recollection at all of that day. Mm-hmm. But I know what I normally do, and I know what I would have done. But Laura, my wife, has told me what went on and what happened. And I went out, got my gear on, and I had ridden probably about 3/4 of a mile. I was in East Central Forsyth County at the intersection of Samples Road and Highway 20. And then when you cross over Highway 20, it becomes Trammell Road. I had stopped at that red light. I know that because I had a Garmin on my bike, the little bike computer gizmo. And I knew from after looking at it later, I stopped to wait on the red light. I proceeded through the intersection, and probably about 60 yards, something like that, I collapsed. Witnesses that I've spoken to subsequently have told me I looked like a rag doll. I just went over on the bike and hit my head, cracked my helmet. I had a concussion. I had bit my tongue, so I was bleeding out of my mouth and nose. What had happened, I had had a sudden cardiac arrest.
Wow.
And just to throw in here how good God was to me that day, the national average of survival of a sudden cardiac arrest is around between 3 and 4%. So it was a dire situation. I had no heartbeat. I was not breathing. My heart was still quivering, I guess I've been told is the best word, but it was pumping no blood, not doing what it was supposed to do. So a group of people gathered around me. Several people were calling 911, thankfully. I've heard some of those 911 recordings, and that'll put a chill up your spine to listen to that. But no one was doing anything.
So like nobody was actually taking any life-saving measures?
Nothing. And I'm not judging. It was basically a ring of people, but no one was taking any kind of measures. But a nurse from Northside Forsyth was coming up Highway 20 in her van. on her way to take her two dogs to the vet. And she saw the commotion, and as she went through the intersection, she noticed that indeed, as you just pointed out, no one was taking any medical action, no any kind of life-saving activity. So she pulled into the median. She parked her van, and she's told me this, and I know it's true because I know her much better now. She said, "Pups, I'll be back in a minute." So, and as you know, you've been in our home, I talk to my dogs
Yes.
too. That's very believable. She threw up her hand. She stopped traffic on Georgia 20. She ran over. And the first thing she said as she approached was, "He hit by a car." And several people said, "No, he just fell over." Her name is Carrie Stone. She has recently retired from the hospital. She was the house coordinator. Anybody that comes in the hospital, she deals with them. So she was very tuned in to what goes on and how it goes on in the hospital. They told her that I had just collapsed, and she took a pulse just to please the people around me because she knew what the result would be because there was no pulse. She said by then I was turning purple.
Wow.
She very happily describes me as ugly that day. Can't believe that, but anyway, I was in somewhat of a fetal position where I'd come off the bike. I just kind of rolled up, and she asked one of the ladies there to help her roll me onto my back because she knew she had to start CPR. She knew my heart wasn't beating. She knew there was no blood moving with her medical experience. And funny enough, and I want to point this out because this is important to people, there was someone that actually drove by, rolled their window down, and said, "Don't move him," and which is not terrible advice because if there was a partial break, something in the spinal cord, it could have been damaged. But as Carrie has pointed out so many times, as she and I have talked and other people that we've talked to, I was at the bottom. I couldn't get any worse. Dead is dead. And that's basically where I was. And she could have easily broken my spine, rendered me paralyzed, anything. But they rolled me on my back. She started what is known as hands-only CPR. In other words, she didn't breathe. She didn't have to the entire time, but she started the chest compressions. And she probably did compressions about 5 or 6 minutes, maybe less than that, 4 or 5 minutes. And this is one of the things that I like to point out, how God was working that day. First of all, he sent Carrie, who has forever been and forever will, to me, be known as my angel. Some people will dispute that. Some people will call it coincidence, whatever. You can call it anything you want to. I know in my heart of hearts that Carrie was sent by God. She was indeed an angel. She didn't have wings and a halo and all that stuff, but she is and will forever be my angel. And so he sent her. Number two, we were within sight, if you stood up on your tiptoes, of Forsyth County Fire Department Station number 15. Actually, somebody stopped at the station before they even got the 911 calls or the dispatch and said, "Hey, some guy fell off his bicycle down here and he's in trouble." So they were already kind of on their way. And they arrived within, probably 5 minutes. Is what I'm told. They, did the same thing, asking, was he hit? What was going on? The whole time Carrie's doing CPR. They begun their life-saving activities, which first is continue the CPR. And this is another God thing. That was done by a Lucas device. I'd never heard of it. I know a little bit about it now. It's basically a mechanical CPR machine. It was the first day that they had it on the truck.
Wow,
They had
really?
never used it. They'd been trained in it, but they'd never used it. I was the first patient from that station. And it requires a backboard that went behind the patient, and then the top is basically just a pump. Carrie would not stop. She would stop long enough because she knew that she needed to keep that blood flow moving.
Yeah.
So they got that Lucas device on me finally. And a little funny side note, though, the firefighters have told me since then that they couldn't get that woman off of me just to put the Lucas device on because she was so intent on making sure you to see. And I've always told them that I typically did not have that effect on women, but that day, I guess there was something about it. And also, she had told me even before they got there, as she began the CPR, she could see my color starting to come back, more of a pinkish color than that grayish purple, as she describes. So she knew that blood was flowing. They continued the CPR. They couldn't get an IV because my veins had already started to collapse. So they drilled a hole in my leg bone to introduce whatever IV fluid that they needed. So, and of course, they could have cut my toes off at the time. I didn't know anything that was going on with all this, so no problem. But once on the ground, and they didn't get what's known as a sinus rhythm back. I think the second shock was applied in the ambulance, and I think they did get a sinus rhythm back there. But here's another thing that makes me think God was in control. We were probably maybe 2.25 miles from Northside Hospital Forsyth, which has a full cardiac unit and everything, cath lab, the whole deal. So we were there quickly. When I was riding, I wear what's known as a road ID bracelet. It's got just general information. You've probably seen them. And someone had called my wife, Laura, and told her that I had been in an accident. She had had surgery about 3 or 4 months prior. She wasn't even supposed to be driving, but she, of course, hopped in the car, almost beat me to the hospital, and my heart started again once we got to the hospital, but, still a very critical situation. And she got there. My oldest son, Jacob, got there. He worked nearby. My youngest son, Isaac, wasn't there yet. He works in Atlanta, so it took him a while. But they led them into this little private room. And I have found that when they take you in the little private room,
wow, so they're freaking out, not knowing what's going on.
They have no idea if I was hit by a car. They have no idea that it's a heart issue. I don't know the exact time, Mary, how long it took, but I regained consciousness fairly quickly, and I began asking what had happened. Now, again, I don't have any recollection at this date it took me about 3 or 4 days to begin to get back. I had a pretty severe concussion. Even though I was wearing a helmet, it cracked the helmet pretty
let's
good.
back up really quick. When the ambulance arrives there on the scene and Carrie's doing a CPR and they finally were able to shock you and get some rhythm back to your heart, does that mean that whole entire time from when you fell over there on your bike to when they shocked you that you were not breathing?
I was not breathing. I did not have a heartbeat. And it was probably somewhere around 4 minutes.
4 minutes you weren't breathing.
I wasn't breathing. However, because of Carrie's action and her doing the CPR, I did have blood moving through my system. There was still oxygen in my lungs, and her pumping moved the oxygen through my body, through my lungs. So I wasn't without oxygen to my brain for that entire time. It was depleted, but it wasn't totally gone for that period of time. Several people asked, we were talking about that and said, you were without oxygen, and they've asked. I remember one time, I remember this in the hospital. It was several days after, and both of my loving sons were there, and they asked, did he suffer any brain damage? And in unison, they said, no, he's always been this way.
That sounds like sons.
Obviously, as you know, they probably take after their dad. I was in ICU, I think, 4 or 5 days, or cardiac care unit. And then I was in a regular room, I think, for another 5 or 6 days. I was in there 10 or 11 days. They did all kind of tests, catheterizations, where you walk on the machine, stress test, every EKG, echocardiogram that they could think of. And Mary, the only thing that they could determine, there was a small amount of scar tissue on my heart. They said it could have been there from birth. And they said that's the only thing that they could think would lead to this cardiac arrest. And that's why they implanted a defibrillator. I have an ICD. It's a defibrillator. It is designed to shock me should I ever go into
wow, so it'll shock
again.
You.
Yes. It's never fired. I asked my electrophysiologist if I would know if it shocked me. He said, oh, you'll know. He said, you ever been kicked in the chest by a horse? And I said, well, not yet. And he said, well, you'll know. So it's designed, and I'm coming up on 10 years, and I got to get a new battery. I got to go into Sears and get a new diehard stuck in here to keep this thing moving. But they spent all this time, and a lot of people will call this a heart attack, and I'm no medical guy, but this was not a heart attack. A heart attack is typically a muscular or a circulatory issue. This was 100% electrical. I had no blockages. I had no damage to the heart muscle. Nothing whatsoever that they could find. It was just an electrical shut off, just like you reached over there and flipped the lights off in your studio, and it was lights out.
That is just insane. It gives me chills, Darryl, to hear your story and to know that, like, maybe you were quivering breathing, like you said earlier, but you're not breathing like you should, and you're still here to this day.
No.
Like, it gives me chills.
Absolutely. I think through all the things, some I've already mentioned, the location, how God sent Carrie there. But Mary, that year I had been for hours alone on mountain bike trails, not seeing another human for hours at a time. I had traveled. I had been in hotel rooms by myself night after night after night. So many times, so many places had that occurred. I would not be here doing this podcast today. But for whatever reason, God wasn't through with me. You get the typical questions I always have. Well, did you see bright lights? And did you hear? And me being me, I said, I got to come up with a story to make this sound a little bit better. So my story is that I did indeed hear a voice, and the voice was, calling my name. And then this other voice said, no. Today's catch and release. Throw him back. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I did not hear, I did not see anything, but so many people were in the right place at the right time. And I'm not being facetious in any way, but the way I kind of look at it is that God got up that morning and said, hey, this is the day that guy in Georgia is going to have a cardiac. I need to get everything in place. And he put everything in perfect place.
Like, what if Carrie would have showed up 2 extra minutes later? Like, everything was lined up perfectly for such a terrible situation.
Yes. Carrie came to visit me a number of times in the hospital since she was there on a regular basis. And getting close to my discharge date, someone in her neighborhood heard about the event, and they said, well, come and do something in our clubhouse, teach hands-only CPR, just a simple CPR. Carrie invited me to come along and tell our story, and while she taught the CPR. We have taught well over 1,000 people hands-only CPR. Now, you're not certified, you don't have a card in your wallet, anything like that. And I go back to the lady that I mentioned that was at the accident scene, at the event scene. She knew CPR, but Mary, she was scared to death to do anything. She knew what to do. She had her little card. She'd been trained. And what Carrie and I have emphasized so hard is anybody can save a life. Number one, she teaches the proper procedure, where to place the hands and how to use it. And just don't be afraid to try.
Anything is better than nothing, right?
Well, absolutely. And again, you can't get any deader than dead. You're not going to hurt someone. If they wake up, or they'll say, hey, you don't quit pumping on my chest, I'm awake, or whatever, they're going to let you know. But we have been so blessed to teach so many people, a lot of high school, middle school students in churches, in community centers. We've taught Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, yoga studios, bike clubs, CrossFit places. To be invited to that and to teach so many people that you can save a life is a blessing. Now, we keep praying that someday we'll hear from someone that we taught that used that ability. Whether we do or not is immaterial, but that would really thrill us if that happened. If nothing else, I gained an awesome friend with Carrie. Every December the 29th, Laura and I, and she and her husband, Dean, go out to eat to celebrate the anniversary of our unusual meeting. And every year, Laura has bought Carrie an angel statue. So 9 statues to date. And she will have 10 when we meet again this December.
Darryl, because you mentioned, angel, and when I heard your story for the first time and you brought up Carrie, I thought of her as a guardian angel. And it takes me back, like in the Bible in Psalm 91, where he says he's going to command his angels concerning you. And he put Carrie on that route, and I just felt like she was a guardian angel in your situation.
There's no doubt about that. There are angels among us, and we don't always know the song from Alabama, Angels Among Us. I always liked that song, but I always considered it, a neat little Christmas song, whatever. And now it's very hard for me to hear it and not get emotional, because I have lived that song, and I continue to live that song, because indeed God has placed angels among us.
And I want to go back to what you were mentioning about the hands-on classes that you're teaching, and what you said, over 1,000 people.
Yeah, I think we've been in every high school and every
Wow.
middle school in Forsyth County.
You could have went home and just like counted your blessings and said, okay, I'm good, I'm saved. But you took this opportunity and turned it around to teach other people. If I was in that situation and I saw you there on the highway, you fell off your bike, I wouldn't know how to do CPR. Like, I would have no idea how to help somebody in that situation. So, I mean, because people need to know how to do that.
Yes. A lot of people require it. Some companies require it through their safety programs and all, which is wonderful. I applaud and support those programs 100%. But, you know, those programs go through and they certify you, and you're taught by a certified teacher. But I'm not the first person she stopped and done CPR on. A sad note, if you will, I know at least one did not survive. It was a gentleman where she went to church. He had a massive heart attack.
Wow.
He had a massive blockage in his heart. But she did CPR, and she kept him alive long enough for him to get on a life support and for his family to say goodbye to him. So she's done it hundreds of times, I would say. But to be out on the street, and I like to think now with what Carrie's taught me, that if I saw somebody, that I would at least try. I'd be scared to death, but I couldn't, Mary. I couldn't walk away from it. I couldn't not pass along the wonderful blessing that God gave me that day and try to save someone. And there's others, if I can call out, 3 of the firefighters, Nathan Head, Kevin Lindsay, and Clark Coleman, were amazing heroes that day. And one of the firefighters' wife, Janelle Lindsay, actually drove the ambulance. I was invited to their annual award ceremony, and I got to give them what they call a life-saved pin, which was super amazing, emotional time for me. Carrie was named AJC Nurse of the Year for the following year, so I got to go to that ceremony, and I got to present that to her. So we became kind of minor celebrities there for a while. We were making videos, we were showing up on TV and in the newspaper. I'm glad, though, that our story did get out. Again, this has been 10 years, and here I am with you talking on your podcast and your channel, and this is why it's so thrilling that you're doing this and you allow me to come on and continue to share this story. You may have this question coming up, you know, how has this changed my life or whatever? Well, for one thing, I got to see the birth of 2 granddaughters, the adoption of 2 grandsons. I've begun to see them grow up and develop into nice people. And to go with Carrie and teach this and to share our story. Laura and I have both been able to retire and move from Forsyth County to Toccoa, which you pointed out as part of my name. Mary, I was ready. If God had taken me that day, I would have been in heaven. But I was ready, and from an age of 9 years old, I was ready. But I don't think God was through with me. And I've tried to be more in tune to others' needs and fill in those needs where I can. And obviously, still fail daily to be the man and the Christian that I should be. But it has ingrained in me a desire to be better and to do better and to help others.
Yeah, and I definitely think that he gave you a second chance and a purpose to tell your story and the impacts that God's had on your life. And that's just amazing, you know, because he works in everybody's life and in such different ways, you know, and like, who would have thought that day when you get out just to go ride your bike that all of this would have happened, and 10 years later we'd be here talking about it?
We're still talking about it. We're still being able to share it. And I feel much more blessed that I've had a strong bond and friendship with Carrie all these years, and we've been able to teach it. We have so much fun.
For anybody listening out there, like how God can just use just like an ordinary, everyday person in the most life-changing moments. And I mean, like, you never know throughout your day who you're going to come in contact with and how it could end up changing your life, whether it's a critical situation or you're just like at the grocery store. God just works in those mysterious ways.
And he has told us that he will use things that appear to be bad, that appear to be horrible situations. Yeah. He'll use it to his glory, and he will continue to do so until his return. I am thrilled that he chose to use me that day. I had much rather been laying on that table than Laura and my kids sitting in that room not knowing what was going on. I would change places in a heartbeat because they were in the horrible situation, not knowing, is he gone? Like you said, we never know when we get up every morning what God will give us that day where we can use to his glory. We never know in the morning when we will walk out that door for the last time. And I guess my kids and my wife and close friends and others probably get tired sometimes of hearing me say, I love you.
Because you never know.
One day we will say it for the last time. And I do not want to leave anyone that I care about and them not knowing that you're special to me in that way.
No, and I think that's advice that we all can take, because seriously, you got to let your family, your friends, people that are important in your life know that they're important and that you love them, because things could have turned out in a different situation for you and for your family, Darryl.
Yes, absolutely.
I sometimes feel like in life, you're maybe like looking for something, you're wanting something to happen, and we can't always see it lining up, and we can't always like feel and know what God's doing behind the scenes, but like he's moving things and he's opening doors, and it just goes back to like Carrie being there on that road at the right time. I just love how he lines everything up just the way it needs to be.
Just in his plan. And that's something that I have had a hard time with my entire life, is wanting to fix things myself. A lot of times, instead of waiting on God, letting his plan develop, letting me see his will in my life and following that will. I've gotten myself in trouble a lot of times by doing Darryl's will instead of doing God's will. And that experience, brought me, it taught me what his will was. And like I said, I fail daily, and I'm afraid a lot of us do, but I know I do. There's two particular verses that I kind of anchor myself on. One was when he spoke to the disciples and said, I was naked and you clothed me, I was hungry and you fed me. And they said, Master, when did we do this? And he said, you've done it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. And that to me resonates with, okay, as Christians, how can we serve God? God is not physically on the earth today. Jesus is no longer walking the earth physically as he was in times before. The only way we can do it is to serve others. And then the other verses are when he's talking to Peter and he asks Peter if he loves him. He says, of course I love you. You know that I do. Feed my sheep. So that's one good way we can serve God and we can help God.
Darryl, before we wrap up though, do you have like any advice or a message for someone who feels like maybe life has knocked them down and they're maybe in a moment in their life where they feel like they have almost flatlined? Like, what would you say to somebody like that?
Mary, that obviously is a tough question, but the answer is and always will be that God is in control. If you're not a Christian, get to know him. Believe in him, trust in him. Contact you or I, either one. I know very well that you will, and I will pray for you and try to lead you to Christ. We are in his arms at our lowest points. I'm absolutely grateful for that.
Sums it up great, Darryl. I'm just so thankful that you wanted to come on today and share your story. It seriously means so much to me, and it's such a powerful story, and I feel like this is why I wanted to do this podcast, Darryl, because even in those uncertain, scariest moments, like God's still present. You said he's still in control. He's working, he's healing. And Darryl, you're a living testament to that. And your story is powerful.
Absolutely. And if some of your listeners, if they have a story, I can assure you that this is a young lady that will be glad to get it out. We've only known each other a short period of time, and most of it has been through radio. Like I said, she's visited with us, and we've gotten to know her. There's so many young people out there that are not doing things for the Lord. Like I told you at the beginning of this, I'm so proud of you that you're doing this and you're using your talent, you're using your voice, you're using the abilities that you have, the recording studio, you're using your career, and you could do so many different things with it, and you're using it to God's glory.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud that I can count you
you're so sweet.
Among my friends. We love you, and just so proud that you're doing what you're doing here. And like I said, tell your story. If God's done something for you, wouldn't you want to share it? And if one person, Mary, is led to Christ by a comment that you make, it's worth everything.
Exactly. And sometimes people just think like their story isn't that important or it doesn't have that big of an impact. But like you said, just one person could hear it and that story changed their life or maybe they don't even know anything about God or have any type of knowledge on like the Bible, but that leads them to asking somebody or opening up the Bible. You know, you never know how your story is going to impact somebody's life.
There's always got to be a starting point, and there's always got to be a catalyst. And, you know, for some people, it's years in Sunday school and Bible school and VBS and things of that nature. For others who never had those opportunities, it can be watching someone's life and hearing of something and just getting them to ask questions. And who's this Jesus, and what are you talking about? Do not neglect that opportunity when God gives it to you.
Darryl, thank you so much. This has been so great.
Mary, thank you. You're so charming. You're so wonderful. I love you, and I appreciate all the stuff that you do. And again, thank you for taking these steps, not only just for having me on your podcast, but thank you for all that you do.
Darryl, seriously, thank you.